Hello, today I'll be doing a re-ranking for the band Metallica. And the last time I ranked their discography was around 5 years ago or so. So definitely crazy to think about because I believe I started making videos on this channel around 6 years ago or so. So again, 5 years, crazy to think that it's been that long. But of course, the band did drop 72 seasons last year. So of course, it would make sense to get around to eventually doing a re-ranking for this band. But yeah, I'll be going from worst to best. Keep in mind, this is just my personal ranking. You don't have to agree with it, but feel free to let me know your ranking in the comment section below. But yeah, at the bottom, this will be no surprise for anyone. Pretty obvious choice, but that album is Saint Anger. From the year 2003, when nu metal was still finding commercial success, bands like Linkin Park, for example, were still finding plenty of success on the charts. I mean, this was the year where their album Meteora came out, one of my favorite albums of all time, and a fairly successful album for them. But yeah, with this album, this was a fairly dark period for the band. Recently, around this time, the band lost Jason Newsted, and on this album, Bob Rock plays bass. But yeah, again, they lose Jason Newsted and enters Robert Trujillo. And I think this album is not as bad as some people make it out to be. I mean, of course, it's not great. It's not amazing, awesome, or anything like that. But I do think the album does have its moments. I think there are things to like with the album. Some of my favorites on here: Frantic, the title track, Unnamed Feeling, Sweet Amber. But yeah, there's some songs that I do enjoy off the album. Frantic probably being my favorite. I mean, with the album, yeah, you definitely get your share of fairly dumb lyrics. And of course, you have the iconic snare, iconic for bad reasons, of course. But over time, I've kind of gotten used to the snare. So whenever I revisit anything off the album, the snare doesn't bother me as much. But something you do notice is that the snare does get a bit obnoxious in some songs more compared to some other songs. That is something that I do notice for sure. But also, another thing is the lack of solos, which is definitely a big issue for some people. For me, I'm not sure if solos would have worked with any of these songs. Maybe a couple or a few, but I don't know. The more I think about it, I don't know if solos would really work with some of these songs. But either way, of course, another issue is the production. But of course, I do know that the band was trying to go for a more raw sound, but still, at the end of the day, the production definitely not the best, which is kind of strange, especially knowing that Bob Rock produced this, Bob Rock and Metallica. But yeah, this would be the final album that they would do with Bob Rock, if I remember correctly. And yeah, the album, again, does have its moments. I do like Frantic, the title track, Unnamed Feeling, and some others, but you do have your share of stinkers, though, like Shoot Me Again, and Purify is not great either. And there are some songs in here that definitely could benefit from some trimming, especially, such as songs like Invisible Kid and All Within My Hands and Some Kind of Monster especially. But yeah, the album definitely a huge mixed bag for me. There are things to definitely make fun of, but also things that I would say you can find to like, such as, again, songs like Frantic or The Unnamed Feeling. But let's go ahead and move to the next album in my ranking, and that album is Reload. I know some people like this one more than Load, but I'm a part of the camp that likes Load more. But with this album, I do think it's actually, I would say that it is a good album. I know this album is not for everybody. I know not everyone's into the Load Reload era. I mean, stylistically fairly different from what they did before these albums, with, of course, the thrash in the 80s and the more hard rock or more mainstream metal sound of the Black Album. But again, I like Load and Reload, but of those two albums, I think I like Reload less. But of course, there are some pretty good songs on here, like Fuel, which is probably the best song on here. Memory Remains is cool. I like that song. That's definitely another highlight for me on the album. But really the only issue I have with that song is with that old lady doing the na 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 na. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that at all. But Devil's Dance, for me, one of the stronger deep cuts on the album. I do like the Unforgiven too. Of course, not as good as the first one, no duh. But I do like the second one. Where the Wild Things Are is definitely one of the band's most strange songs, but at the same time, it's actually one of my favorites. Prince Charming, you could maybe say is maybe one of the heavier songs on here, but I do like that one too. But I'm not a huge fan of everything on here, though. Low Man's Lyric is probably one of my least favorite Metallica songs, to be honest. On the more lengthy side, if I remember correctly, and I don't know, I've never been a big fan of that one. It's just never really done a whole lot for me. And there are a couple more average or weaker songs like Attitude and Better Than You. Those, I wouldn't say those songs are bad, but again, a bit more average, a bit more leaning towards filler to me, in my opinion. Slither, I think, is an alright song, but yeah, Reload, I think it's a decent album, but at the same time, easily one of their weakest. But next, we're moving to Load from 1996. Can't imagine what Metallica fans were thinking when this album first came out, but again, I do like this era of the band. Of course, it's definitely nowhere near their best work, but again, I do like Load. There is some good stuff on here. 2x4 is definitely one of my favorites. Rhythmically, I like what they're doing in that song. King Nothing is definitely one of the best singles around this time in the band. I really like King Nothing. Until It Sleeps, I think, is a decent ballad too. But it is one of those albums that I would say has a stronger first half, but a somewhat weaker second half. But the second half does have its moments, though. I mean, Wasting My Hate, for example, one of the more heavier songs in the second half. I do like that song. Thorn Within, I like that one too. Cure is somewhat kind of filler, but I actually kind of dig that song a little bit. But I don't like everything on here, though. Poor Twisted Me, to me, is one of the band's worst songs. Never cared for that song. Ronnie, I think, is another weak song for the band. Not horrible, but again, not really something I return to, or at least return to as much as some of the other songs on the album. And then, of course, you have one of their more divisive songs, that, of course, being Mama Said, where the band goes a bit more country, and I don't mind that song. With that said, I rarely return to it anyway, so there you go. But again, don't mind it, but again, of course, there are songs on the album that I definitely return to a lot more. Bleeding Me, I think, is easily one of their best ballads. Really great song. And now, this might be a hot take for some people, but Hero of the Day, I've never really cared for that song. Of course, it's one of the singles off the album. I don't know. For whatever reason, that's a song that's never really connected with me or really stuck with me. It's just a song that's never really done a whole lot for me, but I'm not going to say that's the worst thing ever or anything like that, but again, never been the biggest fan of that song. But yeah, Load, I think it's a good album. Again, it's not going to be for every fan. Again, I know this is a fairly divisive period for the band, especially with the fans, but I do like Load. But next in my ranking, we have Hardwired to Self-Destruct. So yeah, I have the 3-disc version. So yeah, Hardwired to Self-Destruct, I was definitely into it when it came out, but there are some songs that I definitely don't return to as much nowadays, but there are some pretty good songs on here, like Hardwired, one of the more energetic, one of the more, I guess, thrashy, you could say, songs on the album. But I think Spit Out the Bone is easily the best song on here, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. I mean, when it comes to the more modern work, that's definitely one of the best songs they've done. But I probably like the first disc more. If I were to compare these discs, I'd probably like the first one more. Atlas Rise is a cool song. I like that one. Dream No More kind of sounds like a mix of modern Metallica and Load and Reload a little bit, but again, actually one of my favorites on the album, actually. And Moth into Flame, which was the second single, that's definitely another highlight for me on the album. You move to the second disc, which to me is not as strong, but I do like some of the songs, like Am I Savage and of course Spit Out the Bone. But you do have some of the weaker songs on here. Here Comes Revenge kind of feels like filler to me, and Confusion and Man Unkind are some of the more unremarkable songs on the album. But overall, I'd say it's a solid Metallica album. Again, not one of their best, but still solid, I'd say. The next, we're moving to their latest album, 72 Seasons. So yeah, when this album first came out, I was really into many of the songs on here. There are a few songs that have kind of fallen off for me, but I do think there are some pretty good songs on here, like the title track 72 Seasons, which when it comes to their more modern work, I think the title track is easily one of the best songs they put out. I really like the title track, maybe my favorite song on the album, to be honest. Room of Mirrors is another highlight for me, especially when it comes to the second half. Lux Eterna, which was the first single, I do still enjoy that song. Inamorata, which is the big epic on the album and the first song to go over 10 minutes for the band. I really like that song actually. It's a bit more doomy, you could say, also a bit slower, but for me, one of the well, to be honest, especially when you compare it to the rest of the album, definitely one of the more unique songs on the album, I'd say. And yeah, it has to be one of my favorites, just because it's of how more different it is. I mean, it definitely fits the album well, but again, one of the more different, one of the more unique songs on the album, I'd say. And Shadows Follow, while kind of feels like a leftover from Hardwired, still actually one of my favorites on the album. And You Must Burn is another highlight for me on the album. I mean, there are things about it that definitely remind me of Sad But True, especially the verses of that song, but still, I do enjoy that song. But the album, at the end of the day, definitely kind of feels like standard Metallica, to be honest. Definitely has a lot of similarities to Hardwired, and also there are some songs on here that remind me of some of their older songs, like Too Far Gone, for example, has some riffs that definitely remind me of No Remorse. Then again, You Must Burn there are elements about that song that definitely remind me of Sad But True. But yeah, even with all that said, I think this is actually a pretty solid album from Metallica. And I personally do like it more than Hardwired, which again, Hardwired, solid album. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the next album in my ranking, and that is Death Magnetic. And for me, the biggest issue with the album really is the production by Rick Rubin. Honestly, way too loud, a bit too compressed. But I think there are some pretty good songs on here, though. That Was Just Your Life, for me, is definitely one of my personal favorites. And kind of and this is something you could say about modern Metallica, is that some of their songs can be a bit too long, and that issue can also be seen in this album. But still, I do actually still, at the end of the day, do like this album a bit more than Hardwired and 72 Seasons. But yeah, again, some of my favorites on here, That Was Just Your Life. I do like The Day That Never Comes. All Nightmare Long is a contender for maybe being my favorite on here. Either that song or the Judas Kiss. Judas Kiss, to me, being one of their most underrated songs. Absolutely love that song, actually. If I remember correctly, on the more lengthy side, but I personally really dig that song. And My Apocalypse is definitely another banger on the album. And then you also have the instrumental, Suicide and Redemption, which maybe a bit too long, but at the same time, I actually kind of like that instrumental a little bit. And then The Unforgiven 3, I think is all right. I'll be honest, of the 3 Unforgiven songs, this one is easily my least favorite. I don't think it's bad, but even on this album, I think it's actually one of the weaker songs on the album, which I'm not sure how other people will feel about that, but I like The Unforgiven 3, but I've never loved it. But Magnetic, actually a pretty good album. Once you get past the production issues, then you actually find some pretty good stuff on there. Again, you do have some solid tracks like That Was Just Your Life and All Nightmare Long. But let's go ahead and move on to the next album, one of the biggest selling metal albums of all time. And of course, we all know that album is the Black Album. Came out back in 1991, and yeah, I mean, definitely iconic, definitely a classic for a reason. I mean, sure, you definitely have your share of songs that are maybe a bit overplayed, like Enter Sandman or Nothing Else Matters, but I think the album actually has some pretty good deep cuts, like Holier Than Thou, which is actually one of my favorites on the album. Of Wolf and Man's another pretty good deep cut for the band, I'd say. If you want the more faster side of the band, then you might enjoy the last song, The Struggle Within. Don't Tread on Me is another song that I enjoy. I even like Volbeat's cover of that song, and I'm not even a Volbeat fan, but I do like the cover of Don't Tread on Me. Sad But True, maybe overplayed for some people, or maybe overrated for some fans or some people, but I actually like Sad But True. I still dig that song, actually, but yeah. The Black Album definitely is still a pretty good album to this day, and the production is definitely really great on the album, of course, from Bob Rock. But let's go ahead and move on to the next album, and that album is their debut album, Kill 'Em All. I'm sure some people would probably put the Black Album over this, but I personally really dig the raw aggression of this album. I mean, of course, it is Metallica at their rawest, for sure, or at their most raw, but I personally really dig the album, and I believe this was actually the first Metallica CD that I ever bought, but yeah, a lot of great songs, a lot of classics. I mean, Hit the Lights, maybe one of my favorite album openers from the band. The Four Horsemen is definitely another highlight. I do enjoy James Hetfield's vocals in that song, especially such as in the chorus. Whiplash is another banger, definitely another highlight off the album. Of course, you also have one of their big songs, or maybe the most iconic song on here, Seek and Destroy, another really great song. Phantom Lord, I think, is one of their best deep cuts. And then, of course, you do have the bass solo, Anesthesia Pulling Teeth, which really shows how talented Cliff Burton is as a bass player. Rest in peace. Jump in the Fire is also another really great song. I mean, you really can't go wrong with any of the songs on here. I mean, if we're talking weaker songs or some of the more weaker songs on the album, I'd probably point to Motor Breath and Metal Militia, but even those songs I still enjoy to this day. But yeah, Kill 'Em All, pretty good album, pretty strong debut, I'd say, from the band. The next one we'll be moving to Injustice for All. Of course, the big glaring issue with the album, of course, being the production, mainly the lack of bass. I mean, the production is fairly dry and, dare I say, maybe a bit one-dimensional, but at the same time, even with all that doesn't really harm my enjoyment of the album, to be honest. I mean, there isn't really any filler, I'd say, on the album, and I mean, the title track to me, I think, is one of the more overlooked songs on the album, definitely on the more lengthy side, clocking in close to 10 minutes, 9 minutes and 44 seconds, but I really like the title track, actually one of my favorites on the album. But I mean, so many classics, of course, Blackened, and of course you have their big song, One, which was the first song they did with having a music video, and Freedom's Insanity is definitely another song that I enjoy off the album. Dyer's Eve is definitely through and through a banger, and definitely one of their most aggressive songs that they've done. Harvester of Sorrow is another classic for them. I mean, so many great songs on here, and To Live Is To Die is definitely one of my favorite instrumentals from the band. But yeah, Justice for All, definitely a really great album. Even with the issues that you might have with the production, I still personally get plenty of enjoyment from that album. But next we're moving to an album that most people would probably put at the top, but for me, it is in second place, and that album is Master of Puppets. So yeah, definitely all killer, no filler. I mean, again, a lot of, just like when Justice for All, Master of Puppets also has a lot of classics. I mean, Battery, the title track, Disposable Heroes, Welcome Home Sanitarium. But even the lesser known songs on here I think are also really good, like The Thing That Should Not Be, which is one of the more slower tracks. Not a ballad, but again, one of the more mid-tempo songs, you can maybe say. Leper Messiah, I like the heaviness of the riffs in that song especially. Damage Inc. is definitely another song I enjoy off the album on the more thrashy side, and definitely goes hard especially. And then of course you have the instrumental Orion, which is also really good. But yeah, all around, definitely a thrash metal classic and easily one of the band's best, and I'm sure many fans would agree with me on that. And now for the final album, and also my favorite album from Metallica and one of my favorite albums of all time, Ride the Lightning. This album is awesome. Another album to me that is definitely all killer, no filler. I know some people are not big on Escape, but I have a feeling that some people don't like it just because the band also doesn't like it. So to me, if the band doesn't like it, that doesn't mean you also shouldn't like it either. I like Escape. I mean, it's easily the worst song on the album, no duh. But I do still enjoy that song actually. But I mean, you really can't go wrong with any of the songs on here. Fight Fire with Fire is definitely a banger. I absolutely love that song. Definitely one of the best album openers from the band. For Whom the Bell Tolls has one of the best, maybe one of the best intros in the world of metal. Fade to Black also has one of my favorite solos from Kirk. And Trapped Under Ice is also really awesome. And of course, you also have The Call of Cthulhu, which is the instrumental on the album, and also a solid instrumental. Not my favorite instrumental from the band, but still a solid instrumental. Creeping Death is also really good. Title track is great. I mean, honestly, again, can't go wrong with any of the songs on there. But yeah, Ride the Lightning is my number one. And there you go. That is my ranking of the Metallica albums. And also, I almost forgot to mention this, but when it comes to Lars, I think Injustice for All definitely has his best drumming performance. I forgot to mention that as I was talking about Injustice for All, but again, there you go. But yeah, that is my ranking of the Metallica discography. Let me know your thoughts on my ranking. Do you agree or disagree with some of my placements? Honestly, Injustice for All and Master of Puppets might go back and forth for me when it comes to their placements, but yeah. Let me know your thoughts on my ranking. Let me know your ranking in the comment section below and all that good stuff. But anyways, thanks for watching. Please leave a comment, a like, subscribe. Have a nice day, and take care.